Part 4. Continents and Geology. Earth taking shape. Before Earth was beautiful, it was broken. In the Cambrian world, 500 million years ago, the continents as we know them didn't yet exist, not as unified lands with soaring mountains and fertile valleys. Instead, they were scattered fragments, drifting like forgotten rafts on a restless ocean. These slabs of crust, raw and ancient, bore no trees, no soil, no song of wind through leaves. They were barren, gray, cracked, silent, the bones of a young planet still figuring out who it was. This was a time when the Earth was not yet Earth, at least not the one we know. It was still assembling itself, piece by unstable piece. The tectonic plates, massive, invisible sheets floating atop a sea of molten rock, were in constant, grinding motion. They collided, rifted, slid past each other with a silent, geologic fury. From space, the planet might have looked like a mosaic in motion, a shattered puzzle rearranging itself every few million years. The land masses were small, scattered, mostly clustered near the equator. These microcontinents, like Laurentia, Siberia, and fragments of what would one day become Gondwana, drifted and spun slowly. There were no polar ice caps, no mountains with snow, no green, just rock, vast, dry, empty rock, occasionally scorched by volcanoes or cracked by quakes that split the earth like brittle clay. Rain fell not to nourish, but to erode. The land was lifeless, yet it was moving, always moving. And this movement mattered, for beneath the surface, a war of fire and pressure was raging. Deep inside, the Earth's molten mantle boiled and churned, pushing up ridges along the ocean floor, where new crust formed, glowing and raw. Elsewhere, old crust was being devoured, dragged downward into the depths in subduction zones, an ancient recycling system older than any life. These forces, invisible and relentless, were sculpting the surface of the planet inch by inch, in silence, over eons. But the most astonishing part, this shifting of continents wasn't just tectonic, it was biological. As the continents drifted, they shaped currents, climates, and coastlines. They carved out shallow seas, which flooded the edges of continents and became warm nurseries for Cambrian life. These inland oceans, rich with nutrients and sunlight, became the cradles of evolution. Trilobites, worm-like burrowers, soft-bodied predators, all of them thrived in these shallow marine plateaus, shielded from the open deep. Volcanoes erupted beneath the waves, enriching the waters with minerals. Tides pulled life back and forth, creating patterns that organisms would one day depend on. Plate tectonics, seemingly lifeless, became the pulse of the biosphere, setting the stage for survival, extinction, and rebirth. The very act of the Earth shaping itself shaped life in return. Had the continents remained still, the seas stagnant, the climate uniform, evolution might have stalled. But because the Earth moved, life was forced to adapt, to scatter, to innovate. Species that thrived in one shallow basin perished when continents drifted apart, replaced by new ones better suited for the altered world. This constant geological reshuffling became the great engine of natural selection. And all the while, Earth was becoming more itself. From these drifting fragments, the supercontinent Gondwana would slowly form, a colossal landmass that would eventually give rise to Africa, South America, Antarctica, Australia, and India. It was born not in peace, but in collision. Tectonic plates smashing together with continent-sized force. Mountains rose where ocean floors had been. Earthquakes rippled across newborn shorelines. The planet was sculpting its own identity with each tremor, each eruption, each broken seam. And though no eyes were yet on land to witness it, the future was unfolding in every crack and collision. The rocks beneath our feet, ancient, silent, weathered, still carry the memory of that time. They are the scars of a world in the making. They remind us that nothing is permanent, not even continents, and that even chaos, when given enough time, can create something magnificent. Today, we walk on solid ground. We build cities, plant gardens, draw maps, as if the earth beneath us were still. But it isn't. It never has been. It is always breathing, always shifting. Every earthquake, every volcano, every mountain range is a whisper from the Cambrian, a reminder that we live atop a living, restless planet still shaping itself, even now. Part 5. The psychological impact and aesthetic legacy of the Cambrian world. The Cambrian world is long gone, buried under layers of stone, folded into mountains, submerged beneath seas, and scattered into fossils so delicate they crumble at a touch. But though its creatures are extinct and its oceans dried or shifted, its legacy lingers, not in biology alone, but in the very architecture of our imagination. Why is it that when we look at reconstructions of Cambrian creatures, we feel something stir? Not fear, exactly, nor disgust, but a kind of awe. A wordless curiosity, as if these beings were more than mere fossils, as if they were whispers from a place older than memory, older than myth. There is something deeply unsettling and yet oddly beautiful about the Cambrian aesthetic. It defies symmetry. It laughs at our ideas of design. 5 eyes, floating spines, bodies without heads. And yet, in that asymmetry, in that chaos, there is order of another kind, one that speaks not to the rules of human art, but to the raw improvisation of nature, creating in darkness, with no audience but time. Psychologically, the Cambrian challenges us. It reminds us that life is not made in our image, that intelligence, beauty, purpose, these are human constructs layered atop a world that has never owed us explanation. Cambrian creatures weren't designed to impress or even to survive forever. They were expressions, unfiltered, undirected, born in the crucible of chance and pressure. And yet, from them came us. When we gaze into the fossilized eyes of a trilobite or trace the soft imprint of a helicocygenous spine in ancient shale, we're not just looking back, we're looking inward, deep into the ancestral memory written in our DNA. Because these creatures are not just part of history, they are part of our story. They swam before minds could think, before eyes could reflect, and yet they paved the way for consciousness to arise. Aesthetically, the Cambrian world has seeped into our art, our dreams, our science fiction. Alien creatures in movies and games bear uncanny resemblances to Opabinia or Wiwaxia. Why? Because the alien is already here. It always was. Evolution's first designs were stranger than any fantasy. They remind us that the uncanny isn't from outer space. It's buried beneath our feet. This deep time perspective has a psychological weight. It humbles us. We who build skyscrapers and split atoms, we are still descendants of something soft, slow, and ancient. We carry the legacy of those first fears, those first instincts to flee or fight, to sense, to respond. The brain, the spine, the eye, all owe their existence to experiments that began in Cambrian seas. We are not separate from that world. We are its echo, its continuation. And yet, we forget. In a world obsessed with the now, with speed, with novelty, with control, the Cambrian invites us to slow down, to listen, to remember that life has always been strange, that the earth has always been reinventing itself, that stability is the illusion and transformation is the truth. There is a kind of spiritual comfort in this, that we are not the center of creation, but part of a vast flowing river of forms, that our ancestors were once eyeless worms and spike-covered crawlers moving through water without knowing they were alive, and that somehow, out of that mystery, came awareness, emotion, art, and the question, where do we come from? The Cambrian doesn't answer. It only opens the door. And so we stand here, artists, scientists, children, wanderers, staring into the past, not for answers, but for a sense of scale, of wonder, of belonging. The Cambrian reminds us that we are not just made of atoms, we are made of stories older than stone. We are not the first dreamers on this planet. Earth itself was dreaming long before we woke up. To truly bring the Cambrian world to life, one must paint not only with light and texture, but with memory and imagination. This is not a documentary of facts alone. It is a portal, a voyage, a return to a world too old for words and too strange for comfort. The visuals must do more than inform. They must awaken something ancient inside us. Imagine the opening frame, darkness. A slow, haunting hum rises. Faint glimmers begin to ripple across the screen, shafts of filtered light penetrating a thick, green ocean. Particles drift like stardust through the water. Then, from the shadows, something stirs. A creature appears, long, gliding, with eyes that reflect ancient starlight. It's Anomalocaris. Its translucent body flexes as it moves with eerie grace, casting a fleeting silhouette against the glow. It doesn't blink, it doesn't breathe the way we do, but it lives. And in that moment, so does the Cambrian. Each visual sequence in the documentary should feel like entering a painting, not static, but alive. The ocean is rendered in deep gradients of blues, teals, and grays, like an alien sky turned inward. Creatures aren't just displayed, they emerge as if waking from long fossilized dreams. Textures are crucial: the soft sheen of gelatinous skin, the glint of mineral armor, the fine details of segmented limbs and waving tendrils. Every frame whispers, this world was real. Transitions are slow, almost meditative. Instead of sharp cuts, the camera drifts like a current, as if the viewer is floating alongside these ancient beings. Occasionally, the world blurs, not from lack of clarity, but to simulate the watery distortion of ancient vision. Light bends and dances as it would have 500 million years ago, filtered through layers of primitive atmosphere and sediment. Moments of stillness matter. The camera lingers on a hallucigenia as it crawls awkwardly across the ocean floor, its back covered in wicked spikes. The lighting shifts from cold lunar blue to the warm glow of thermal vents, revealing clusters of worm-like creatures feeding off the mineral-rich plumes. These moments are silent, except for a slow, pulsing tone in the soundtrack, the heartbeat of Earth itself. Then the scale expands. Wide aerial shots show the broken jigsaw of ancient continents floating across a superocean. Volcanoes erupt beneath the waves in muffled thunder. Lightning forks across a sky thick with gas. Tectonic plates grind beneath the crust, and in the background, animated overlays map their movement in glowing lines. It's a reminder, the ground was never still. To complement these visual tapestries, augmented elements appear, not as intrusions, but as guides. Subtle overlays reveal anatomical diagrams of strange creatures, X-rays of primitive organs, time-lapse morphs showing their descendants across ages. These cues help the audience understand, but never interrupt the magic. The soundtrack flows with the story, ambient, orchestral, otherworldly. There are no synthetic distractions, only tones that breathe, that echo through deep time. Occasionally, a distant roar, the sound of shifting rock, or the eerie clicking of ancient limbs adds tactile depth. It is music that doesn't tell you what to feel. It reminds you that you're not in your world anymore. Color grading is essential. The palette shifts by layer of depth, light cyan above, fading to dark cerulean, then to the ink black of abyssal zones. Creatures near the surface are bathed in filtered golden rays. Deeper down, bioluminescent flashes pulse like language, illuminating the outlines of life in complete darkness. And perhaps the most powerful moments are those of contrast. A soft-bodied worm writhing in sediment, juxtaposed to a planet-shaking subduction quake that drowns the seafloor. A microscopic eye forming in a larva, matched with the blazing formation of the supercontinent Gondwana. Micro and macro, intimate and immense. Earth as organism, as artist, as myth. In the final scene, the camera pulls away through layers of rock, water, atmosphere, back into the present. Fossils lie quiet in stone. The ancient sea is now a dry mountain, but in the quiet dust, something glints. A trilobite's eye, perfectly preserved. And we hear faintly the echoes of a time when the ocean dreamed and Earth began to remember itself. This is not just a visual story, it's a resurrection. And it must look, feel, and sound like nothing we've ever seen, and everything we once were. Part 7. Suggestions for the next topic. The ambiguous era has ended. The bizarre creatures that once ruled the oceans now lie silent, pressed deep beneath ancient stone. Yet even in silence, they continued to tell a story, not just of life that once was, but of a journey that has never truly stopped. Because Cambrian, at its core, is not a destination. It is an opening chapter. The prelude to a symphony that stretches across hundreds of millions of years, where each note is a burst of evolution, and every pause is a mass extinction cloaked in stillness. As the final light of the Cambrian seas fades, a new door opens, one that leads us into even more ferocious, dramatic, and magnificent epochs. A world where life doesn't just expand, but begins to transform, to fight, and eventually to take its first breath on land. But not all movement is upward. Sometimes Earth fights back, and when it does, what once thrived can vanish almost completely. The first of these cataclysms comes swiftly, the Ordovician extinction, Earth's first great purge. No asteroid, no explosive volcanoes, just ice. An ancient ice age creeps in, freezing the shallow seas and killing off over 85% of all marine species. It is a quiet apocalypse and a stark reminder no life form is guaranteed permanence. But Earth breathes again, life returns, and then something extraordinary happens. A creature with bones begins to crawl from the sea, first with clumsy fins, later with sturdy legs. In that moment, the conquest of land begins, quietly, timidly, but with revolutionary force. Dry land, once sterile and empty, becomes the new frontier. Gravity, sunlight, open air, all unfamiliar and all irresistible. The planet shifts in return. Plants rise, primitive forests emerge. Trees pull carbon from the skies, releasing oxygen, cooling the world, and transforming the air itself. But once again, abundance breeds instability. The Permian period ends with a cataclysm unmatched in all of Earth's history. Over 90% of species disappear. The sea dies, the skies choke, methane bubbles up from the depths, a suffocating silence falls. And yet, life endures, and when it returns, it dreams bigger. Dinosaurs appear, vast, magnificent, towering. For 160 million years they thunder across Earth, a living monument to evolutionary might. Strength, speed, grace. From ocean depths to volcanic highlands, they dominate. Until one day, a flicker crosses the sky. A meteor, fire, darkness, extinction. And in the ashes, a small fur-covered creature shivers but survives. From it come mammals, and from then, eventually, comes a species that asks, where do we come from? The answer does not begin with humankind. It begins with trilobites, with hallucigenia, with apobenia, with rock and ocean and fire, and with the earth itself, breaking and rebuilding again and again. The Cambrian journey has not just shown us how life began, it has revealed that everything we call stable is only temporary. Natural history has no place for the unmoving. It belongs to those who adapt, who evolve, who rise again after every fall. So if you've ever looked into the ocean and thought, this is where it all began, you were right. But the next question must be, and what came after? Walk with us. The story continues. Before humans, before the dinosaurs, before forests swayed in the wind or snow-capped peaks stood in frozen silence, Earth was already a world so wondrous, so unimaginable that no myth could contain it. A blue planet, not because of trees, but because of oceans. No voices, no songs, only nameless creatures drifting through the endless currents of time. The Cambrian period is gone, but it never truly vanished. It lives on in every breathing organism today. In your eyes, echoes of the first vision that pierced the watery light. In your heartbeat, the distant drum of ancient fins pushing against the current. In your spine, the living legacy of hundreds of millions of years of trial, failure, and survival. We are not merely descended from apes, nor simply born of mammals. We are the living memory of the Cambrian. We are the most articulate answer to a question nature began asking in silence. Can life emerge, change, and endure long enough to tell its own story? The answer is yes, and that answer is us. So when you look up at the stars, remember, Earth was also a dream of rock, of water, of life flickering into being amid the chaos. And though we left those ancient oceans long ago, somewhere deep inside us, we are still swimming. The Cambrian has closed, but the journey is far from over. Ahead lie mass extinctions, towering monsters, the first brave steps on dry land, and eventually, us. We are not just the storytellers, we are part of the story. And the story is still being written.